Good morning, everyone. My name is David Yackel. I'm a member of this church, and it is my job to welcome you here today. Invite you to get your phones out, check in on social media if you use that. Let everybody know that you're here, and then please silence them for our service. I want to let you know that in addition to the exits in the back, there are 2 exits on either side of the stage should we need those in an emergency. I want to welcome those that are not here as well in person with us, those that are on our live stream. And then wanted to see, do we have anybody that has brought a guest with them or is new to our All Souls community that wouldn't mind standing up, letting us know who you are and where you're from? Good.
Close to a decade. Kids in my business are comfortable with this, so they can talk and ask for questions. So they're friendly at that point.
Welcome. Any other visitors with us today? If not, please let us know that you are welcome, and we will get started with our service.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It is good to be here once again in the gathering of this covenant community of memory and promise. Be welcome here in the spirit of mutuality and goodwill. Wherever you come from, whatever your journey has been, whoever your ancestors were, whoever you love, whatever scars or heartbreak you bear, whatever questions you carry, whatever dreams you cherish, whatever justice summons you, whatever name you call, the holy flame of reverence within you. Be welcome here. And in our company, pause. Enter into reflection, that we may each gaze into the measure of our days. Enter into fellowship, that we may honor and encourage one another. Enter into thought, that we may uplift our minds to great ideas. Enter into a story of heritage, that we may find our places in the march of time. Enter into an acknowledgement of life's sacred dimension, where meaning and purpose are known. As the world around us echoes with confusion, violence, and suffering, even as spring creeps in beauty across the prairie, even as the rivers rise in destruction, let us discover again rest and peace. Let us discover again comfort and the quiet spirit. Let us discover again the energy of resistance and the voice of courage. Let us discover again the call of conscience and the gifts we bring. Let us discover again our common humanity and our kinship with the life of all that is. Let us discover again our vision of a more just and peaceful world and the faithful hope that together we can bring that world to birth. May the chalice flame that we kindle here reflect the light of our aspirations far out into the world, and may we learn to live as faithful servants of that light.
My name is Savannah, and I like this chapter for the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Now let's rise in body and or spirit and speak once again the words of our community's covenant promise. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And let's remain standing for our opening song. Our commitment to human fellowship means that we are called upon to be glad with those who rejoice and to weep with those who mourn. And so we set aside this time in our gathering to share with one another the joys and concerns that are now shaping our lives. May the beauty and sweetness of these brief flowers remind us to hold one another in the bonds of sympathy, encouragement, and care. If there's a joy or concern that you'd like to share, but you would prefer not to be on camera for our video stream, we'll have a time in a few minutes when the camera will be turned away, so you can hang on till then. I want to begin with a flower of concern for the thoughts that are with our friends on the banks of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers and all the Midwest floodplains, those who are experiencing devastating destruction from the rising flood waters. Let us all do whatever we can to support them in their time of need. Are there other joys or concerns to be shared?
Good morning. I'm Anthony Edwards. I'm the music director here at All Souls, and we have a very special birthday in the house today. I just want everybody to know that it's Ginger Power's birthday.
Yeah.
And we'd just like to sing to her. You can ask her what number, I'm not going to say, but let's sing to her.
Chuck.
Well, spring has finally sprung.
Yay.
Two things. A lot of us come to the church and we kind of come in and out of that parking lot and we're here and gone. Take time to walk around our grounds. There's a special delight every year at this time, just this side of the playground, go down the steps and head south. They're called scilla, a beautiful blue flower, and you'll see them for about 2 weeks and then they're gone. The daffodils will be coming up. They should be in their glory next week. I don't want you to miss these things. They're too much fun to see. take time to walk around the grounds behind Simpson House through the year, too.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly, I want to thank the many people who helped me during the year without being heralded or praised or anything, just there and helping willingly. And it's so nice to have that assistance. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to do a flower? After all that about our flowers, you can't leave without putting one in. That's it. Thank you, Chuck.
I have two joys to share. First, I have an AmeriCorps position that runs out in May with the Kansas City Teacher Residency, and I just got a summer position with what's called the Urban Leaders Fellowship, which means I'll be helping out State Senator Lauren Arthur. Those of you from the Northland probably know her. And I will be helping out a nonprofit in the morning. So they're going to help me land a permanent job at the end, so I'm very excited about that. My other joy is that Crystal and I are planning a booth for Pride for All Souls, which should reach a lot of people that are in need of a faith that embraces them.
We really appreciate the work that you're putting into that. Thank you, Rich.
My name is Beth Andes, and I want to share a joy about this congregation and our warming center. We just had a meeting last week, and I think there was like 20 people who signed up for a variety of things, including looking into doing this on an ongoing basis and what that would take. And I just love how the community came together in just a moment, it seemed. And a special shout out to our intern minister because she was huge in getting all that together. So love you guys, really.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to follow up on what Chuck Downing said. And I want you all to know that Chuck is here day after day working on the grounds, regardless of who's helping him. He's the one that keeps this going and keeps our grounds looking so beautiful. So thank you, Chuck.
Yay, Chuck.
Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal, or Max Baird, if you guys hadn't known. If you were here last week, you guys saw me speak to my gender identity, and if you weren't, there was a lot of great stories. But because of the really just warm and just amazingly supportive response you guys gave me as I came out as Max, I did something I did not think that I could do. This past week, I came out from the closet in my professional life as well. With your guys' help, I don't think I would have done that. So, thank you guys so much.
Don't forget your flower.
Sorry.
Thanks for telling us. That's sweet. Hey, Ollie.
Well, I have a joy and a concern. Dick's coming home on Tuesday.
All right, yay!
And that's joyful, but I'm concerned about all the things that I'm going to have to adjust to and
You gotta get
take on.
ready.
Yeah. So I'm going to need some help.
We're here for you. Yeah. Yeah. It's great to have you here with us today, Dick.
I would like to express a concern and a prayer that we here in America follow the lead of Australia and follow the lead of New Zealand and get back to the rational and sane response to the violence that's happening in our world. We can do this. but we have failed to so far. It is obvious that there is a clear and present danger with military-style weapons in the hands of individual citizens. And we need to get past all of this foolish arguing back and forth about it and ban them like they've done in Australia, which they did in 1996. They've not had a single incident since. And I was so proud of the Prime Minister of New Zealand for saying, we are going to ban these immediately. And we're going to do what Australia did. We're going to do a buyback. We can do that here in America, but we have to stand up to the power that is and say, no more of this. No more of our children should be dying. No more of our citizens should be dying at the hands of people with military-style weapons. Driving me nuts. I can't believe that we played it like this.
Yeah, all right, that's there. Thank you. Are there other joys or concerns to be shared? And at this time, we'll make sure the camera's turned away so you don't have to be on live stream if you don't want to. recognition of all the outreachings of the Spirit that abide unspoken in our hearts. And turn to the screen and join me in our congregational response. Together, let's say, when the great plates slip and the earth shivers and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or strength of cantilevered beam, or reinforced wall to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold us in the web of life that's often torn, but always in the act of healing. The shifting plates, the restless earth, your place, your precious life, they all proceed from love, this ground on which we walk together. And now we invite the children to depart for their classes with song.
Unitarianism traces its roots back to 16th century Transylvania. There, the theologian Francis David, who was first a Catholic, then a Calvinist, before becoming a Unitarian, converted the king and much of the population to a radical theology. A theology that espoused the oneness of God, the humanity of Jesus, and held up reason and tolerance as the pillars of its faith. During the years, Transylvania has been through many times of persecution. Most recently, it was annexed by Hungary during World War II, and following the war, it was under communism and the dictator Ceausescu. Despite that, there are still 50,000 Unitarians living in the Transylvania region of Romania. In 1990, William Schultz led a delegation to Romania with the intent of confronting the Ceausescu regime about a plan to destroy Romanian villages. As it turned out, Ceausescu was overthrown before that trip, but the trip continued, and at its conclusion, the Bishop of Transylvania encouraged Schultz and the other North American Unitarians to form a sister church movement with Transylvania. They did so, and All Souls partner is in Galfafa. While many things have improved since those days, the members still, many of them still don't have running water. The infrastructure is poorly developed. When you visit there, you'll also often see horse-drawn carts performing agricultural roles. Several of us here have visited that church, and the congregation are extremely hospitable. It's a beautiful place, but it's a very poor place. Each year, our congregation sends some money to help them. Most recently, that money was used to revise and update their hot water heating system, and that included a boiler and new copper plumbing. They're currently working on a crack in the that runs from the foundation to the roof of the minister's home, and that's going to include excavation and repairs to the foundation before they can fix the walls. And I should mention that the minister's home is not just his home; it's also got a community room for the youth. That was also, we helped them convert part of the basement for that use. So the offering this morning will be used for that work to continue at that church, and I encourage you to give as much as you can. Thank you.
In this awareness, this morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received. Will you join me in the words of dedication for our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
The scene is Kentish Town, London, February 1858, sometime around 4 a.m. Karl Marx is a wanted man in Germany and is hard at work scribbling thought experiments and notes to self. This piece of writing would come to be called the Fragment on Machines. In it, Marx reflected that the productive value of such machines as the automated cotton spinning machine, the telegraph, and the steam locomotive did not depend on the amount of labor it took to produce them, but rather on the state of social knowledge. Organization and knowledge, in other words, made a bigger contribution to productive power than the work of constructing and running machines. In a final late-night thought experiment, Marx imagined the end point of this trajectory. the creation of an ideal machine, which lasts forever and costs nothing. A machine that could be built for nothing would, he said, add no value at all to the production process and would rapidly, over several accounting periods, reduce the price, profit, and labor costs of everything else it touched. In these musings, not published until the mid-20th century, Marx imagined information being stored and shared in something called a general intellect, which was the mind of everybody on earth connected by social knowledge, in which every upgrade benefits everybody. In short, he had imagined something close to the information economy in which we live. And, he wrote, its existence would blow capitalism sky high.
Is it utopian to believe that we're on the verge of an evolution beyond capitalism? We live in a world in which gay men and women can marry, and in which contraception has, within the space of the last 50 years, made average working-class women freer than the craziest libertine of the Bloomsbury era. Why do we, then, find it so hard to imagine economic freedom? All readings of human history have to allow for the possibility of a negative outcome. It haunts us in the zombie movie, the disaster movie, and the post-apocalyptic wasteland of films. Millions of people are beginning to realize that they've been sold a dream at odds with what reality can deliver. Their response is anger and retreat towards national forms of capitalism that can only tear the world apart. But why should we not form a picture of the ideal life, built out of abundant information, non-hierarchical work, and the disassociation of work from wages? The main contradiction today is between the possibility of free, abundant goods and information and a system of monopolies, banks, and governments trying to keep things private, scarce, and commercial. Everything comes down to the struggle between the network and the hierarchy between old forms of society molded around capitalism and new forms of society that prefigure what comes next.
We live and move and have our being in an economic system founded upon the assumption of scarcity. From an early age, whether we are privileged or oppressed, we are given to understand that everything necessary for human survival and thriving is always in short supply, and that our life project is to compete successfully against others to assure that our own needs will get met. The system of industrial market capitalism also assumes that in order to get us to do our share of the world's work, people must be motivated by fear of not having enough and by greed to possess ever more of the world's finite wealth. The essential truth of this view appears intuitive. And yet, our ideas of what constitutes scarcity are relative and changeable. Between the adoption of double-entry bookkeeping by the trade cities of Italy at the time of the Renaissance, to the invention of the steam engine and the rise of the Industrial Revolution, Western Europe underwent a dramatic transformation from a feudal, land-based economy to an industrial market capitalism that would help to create the modern world. That transition would take centuries to spread across the globe, accompanied always by social disruption and the resistance of existing powers, and often accompanied with violence and trauma in the form of colonialism. The new economy replaced the oppressions of feudalism with a different system of oppression, founded less in the authority of tradition than in the idolatry of efficiency. While there may be much to deplore in the impact of capitalism, particularly on the natural environment and the well-being of the planet, it also summoned a flurry of technical innovation that has transformed the expectations of ordinary human lives over the course of the past 5 centuries. That innovation has altered the calculus of human survival as a function of human labor and made most of the world profoundly interdependent. I love a homegrown tomato as much as anyone. And that one single peach that the tree in my backyard produced last summer was utterly delicious. But I could not begin to meet my own entire nutritional needs with the edible things that I grow for myself. Rather, I rely on an intricate network of growers, transporters, and sellers to supply my food so that I may focus on this weird ministry thing that I do. A capitalist economy assumes that I am exchanging my labor in writing this sermon, for instance, for a wage, which I then exchange for the products of other people's labor. The traditional critique of this system is that it sees all human beings as strictly rational and ultimately selfish individuals, struggling to survive in a universe of scarce resources and endless competition. Analysts like Karl Marx reasoned that such a system was inherently oppressive and thus unstable. They looked for workers to unite and revolt against private ownership of the means of production. But that expectation supposes that onerous, unwilling human labor is always a necessary element of the production process. What happens, as Marx asked himself in those early hours of February 1858, if you have an ideal machine that lasts forever and costs nothing. Visionary as he was, Marx could not have anticipated how closely the rise of information technology at the opening of the 21st century would come to resemble the qualities of his hypothetical ideal machine. In 2015, however, the economic journalist and commentator Paul Mason published a book in which he made that connection and suggested that we may be living at the front edge of the next global economic restructuring. Just as humanity once moved from the agricultural to the industrial age, we may be seeing the start of the information age. Just as acres of farmland, once diminished in importance next to factories and coal, there may come an era when the crucial resource is access to all the accumulated data of human knowledge, an access made possible for everyone by computers and satellite technology at a trivial cost in either energy or labor. If Marx was right, the existence of that access would, as he said, blow capitalism sky high. And it would do that, Mason suggests, without the historical necessity of the workers' revolution that Marx once more clearly predicted. Let me invite you to consider three seemingly unrelated phenomena that appear to me to point in this direction. The first is a very live issue for the practical operation of this congregation, the ways in which we are organized to receive money. Speaking of which, please say nice things to your Canvas caller when you hear from them presently, and get your responses in so they don't have to chase you down in order to complete their work. Thank you. But here's the thing. Our office knows how to handle cash. We know how to cash checks. Over the past several years, we've gotten better at taking credit cards for purchases. And we can manage automatic deductions from your bank account for pledge payments. But we are only now working out how to take credit card-based automatic deductions. Personally, I know it has been months since I paid for anything in cash, and I only write checks to pay random bills and for stuff here. I'm old school enough that I generally use credit cards, but I'm aware that even this is a generational artifact. We are working on how All Souls can get paid through Venmo and similar phone apps, because we know that for many younger adults, that is how money works. Here's the point. In this economy, money consists of information. I don't have a pile of gold coins in a vault like the cartoon Scrooge McDuck rejoices in. I have lines of computer code at the bank, lines of computer code in a mutual fund, lines of computer code at American Express. Money isn't an object anymore. It's pure data. Second thing, the Industrial Revolution replaced subsistence human labor with the power of engines and vastly increased the productive capacity of workers. It didn't happen instantly, and it didn't happen evenly over society. But some of the early beneficiaries of the ability to get more accomplished by fewer people were children. The notion that people who are not yet adults are required to contribute to the drudgery of the world as soon as they are physically capable is a given of feudal economics. When parents can produce enough for the family to thrive without the labor of preteens, those children tend to be released from labor for longer periods of education and play. At some point, it becomes possible to release people who have become infirm with age also. The way most of us understand the world today, child labor is an abhorrent idea, something to be prohibited by law. We completely detach the value of a child as a human being from their productive or wage-earning capacity. We consider that to be a moral value. We know how this is done. We could do it for people other than children. Third thing, as an introvert, I actually like self-checkout lanes. It always troubles me to watch someone else doing a tedious task on my behalf that I am perfectly capable of doing for myself while I stand there watching. Back in the day, when a representative of the establishment had to know something about prices, make accurate change, and handle money honestly, human attention was required. For those who like to feel waited on by another person, the attention of a checkout clerk may still feel like value added in the purchasing process. But it does not make sense to me to preserve a grueling and needless task just so that someone can be paid for doing it. In the 18th century, the ability of machines to weave fabric vastly increased the amount of cloth that could be produced by a given amount of human effort. And this was resisted by traditional weavers, who naturally and accurately feared that the demand for their services would diminish. Yet the quantity and quality of cloth available to the average person increased dramatically, and the need for millions of hours of tedious labor disappeared. Paul Mason proposes that the coming wave of automation, currently stalled because our social infrastructure cannot bear the consequences, will hugely diminish the amount of work needed, not just to subsist, but to provide a decent life for all. In other words, the capacity of the computer-robot alliance to release human beings from repetitive, non-creative tasks has not been anywhere near fully realized. Not because we haven't figured out how to make it happen technically, but because we aren't sure how to deal with the loss of structure in our cultural identity. What would it mean to our self-understanding if it were possible to release all people from labors of production in the same way that we now assume that children and the elderly should be released? What if the world were so abundant in the necessities of sustenance that there no longer had to be a trade-off between unwilling, ungratifying work and survival? The capitalism that we are used to is founded in part upon a moral equation that ties the worth of adults and the meaning of their lives to their productiveness. The transition to a post-capitalist economy, Mason posits, will entail the dissociation of work from wages. I don't know how true that may turn out to be, but I know that the concept is hard for me to wrap my mind around. And yet, I observe in my own experience some suggestive evidences. Mason writes, "The main contradiction today is between the possibility of free, abundant goods and information and a system of monopolies, banks, and governments trying to keep things private, scarce, and commercial. Everything comes down to the struggle between the hierarchy and the network, between old forms of society molded around capitalism and new forms of society that prefigure what comes next. This notion reminds me of the free hot soup folks here in our own city. A loosely organized online community that invites anyone to prepare soups, sandwiches, beverages, fruit, and other snacks to share with people experiencing homelessness or food insecurity. They gather in different public parks on designated days with whoever shows up to distribute whatever food arrives, sometimes more than is needed, sometimes less. Many of you may remember that they made the news last fall when the KC Health Department tried to destroy the food at one of their gatherings by pouring bleach on it, ostensibly because it had not been prepared in certified kitchens. This is a perfect example of the network versus the hierarchy, or the inflexibility of the whole capitalist model in the face of a whole different kind of economic thinking. The function of the free hot soup network begins from an assumption of abundance. There are people who have food, who want to help, and there are people who are hungry. The crucial ingredient is the information to connect them, which is where the ideal machine of the internet comes in. And this is the really interesting part. No money changes hands. It is not a function of the market as traditionally understood. Yet what does happen is that community starts to be built among those who organize themselves to bring the food, among those who come to avail themselves of it as they spread the word to each other about where the meetups are and bring extras back to the people they know who weren't able to come that day. And between the providers and those in need, as they begin to recognize each other, to greet and thank and embrace each other, to share jokes and hopes and even worry about each other. Can we imagine what kind of world we would build if the measure of a transaction was not how much money it made or how good a deal you got, but rather how much human connection it created? I mean it seriously. Can we begin to imagine that as a whole new kind of economy? Paul Mason says that it is starting to happen right under our noses in the cracks and crevices of the industrial capitalist model that never was infinitely sustainable. Like every other major transition in human history, it is going to have painful aspects and meet resistance and be driven by external forces. Some historians speculate that it was the impact of the bubonic plague, the Black Death that swept across Europe and killed a third of the population, that made labor valuable enough that innovations in efficiency were welcomed and sought after in place of time-honored traditional ways, and gave rise to the changes that eventuated in the Industrial Revolution. The growing planetary climate crisis of our time may be just such another externality that forces our global village, traumatically perhaps, into new patterns of connection, consumption, work, and wealth, and meaning-making. Call it socialism if that pleases you, but I wonder if it isn't even more profound than that. Stuart Brand, founder of the Whole Earth Catalog, once famously said that information wants to be free. It is an interesting ambiguity of the English language whether this implies that information wants to be available without cost or that it wants to be unconstrained in its wide distribution. Either way, the anthropomorphism captures something of how public access to the whole of accumulated human knowledge through the internet approaches the concept that Marx was exploring in his speculation about the ideal machine. It presents us, I think, with an unavoidably spiritual question, which is this: how do we arrive at a value for something that is deeply important, but in no way scarce? The response of the existing industrial market system is the attempt to keep everything, including information, private, commercial, and scarce. Yet if Mason is correct that Marx was correct, this is a rearguard action doomed to fail in the long run. Capitalism can be blown sky high by the paradox of abundance, as well as by the miseries of scarcity, perhaps even more readily in the end. Elsewhere in his article, Mason writes, "If I am right, the logical focus for supporters of post-capitalism is to build alternatives within the system and to direct all actions towards the transition, not to the defense of random elements of the old system." Now, I have rarely in my life met a person who didn't want to do some kind of demanding work, to create art, or teach children, or cure cancer, or build skyscrapers, or set an Olympic record, or share music, or explore the stars. Many folks give up their dream in order to do something tedious that will pay them a living wage in an industrial economy. Maybe you did that too. If it were indeed within our grasp to outsource the drudgery to the machines, would we have the audacity and the vision to build an economic system that was not founded upon the challenges and the values of scarcity, but rather on information that everyone has access to? If not, it seems to me that the failure of imagination is in us. Once upon a time, slavery and hunger and early death appeared as immutable aspects of the human condition. But we have learned over millennia that these can be overcome if we are steadfast in our purpose. Why should we not form a picture of the ideal life, built out of abundant information, non-hierarchical work, and the dissociation of work from wages? Amen. Inquires Paul Mason. Is it utopian to believe we're on the verge of an evolution beyond capitalism? Why do we find it so hard to imagine economic freedom? It seems to me that this is part of our work as a faith tradition, to form that picture, to imagine that freedom, to assert the worth of all people apart from their productivity, to proclaim the value of that which is not scarce. None of us knows, of course, what the future holds exactly. It is possible that the impact of industrial capitalism on the planet has already been lethal beyond repair. But if not, if we can still mend the damage and sort out some kind of mutuality with the earth, you know we are going to have to get over this greed scarcity idea. The network is growing every day more relevant and more powerful than the hierarchy, despite the inevitable and necessary resistance. With the entire wealth of human experience,
data, reason, and imagination at our fingertips, we ought to be able to begin to comprehend abundance. All that is our life depends on it. Let's stand and sing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. So may the future that we envision lead us from the terror of death to more abundant life, from falsehood to truth. May it lead us from despair to hope, from fear to trust, from hate to love, from war to peace. In its light, may peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. So be it.
Yeah.